Good morning. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Bersigar Explorer reference BG-1651. I paid £120 for this watch and I bought the watch from Amazon. So this is the 40mm version of the Bersigar Explorer. Early versions of the Bersigar Explorer were a larger 43mm case size. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I will talk you through the items that come with the watch. The Bersigar Explorer comes in a black cardboard watch box, and the watch box is protected by this black cardboard outer sleeve, and it has the Bersigar brand logo on the top, as you can see. So this is the watch box that the watch comes in. It's a basic black cardboard watch box, which I think is acceptable, bearing in mind that this is a low tier price point piece. It's only £120. The watch is protected by a piece of foam, and inside there is a second piece of foam with a cutout in the shape of the watch to prevent the watch sliding around in shipping. So basic cardboard watch box with foam inside, but it does the job of protecting the watch. The watch did come well wrapped in plastic to protect it from being scuffed and scratched in transit. One also gets this jeweler's screwdriver, so it's a 1.6mm flat bladed screwdriver. And it's nice to see that included with a watch, because it means that you can resize the bracelet yourself if you don't have a set of watchmaking screwdrivers. One also gets a Bersigar branded polishing cloth for the watch, and I think it's a nice touch for a brand to include a branded polishing cloth. I always like to see that with a watch. Lastly, one also gets an owner's instruction manual. So this booklet is basic, but it does detail how to operate the automatic movements used in the Bersigar Explorer. The Bersigar Explorer uses a Seiko NH35A automatic movement. So this is a useful read if you're unfamiliar with automatic movements or operating a Seiko NH35A. So with regards to the watch itself, this is the 40mm version of the Bersigar Explorer. Early versions made by Pagani Design and also Bersigar came in a 43mm version. It was very similar in proportion to the Rolex Sea Dweller. But this current version is slightly smaller at 40mm. It's more like the Submariner Super case, and it does actually do a good job of replicating the Rolex Yachtmaster case as an homage to it. One can clearly see the similarity because it has the same 3D ceramic bezel inset as the Yachtmaster, so it's very aesthetically pleasing. One thing I like about this 40mm version is the black sunburst dial effect. The early versions, the 43mm version of the Bersigar Explorer, had a graduated dial. The dial graduated from black to blue, and I disliked it because it reminded me of a Rolex Deep Sea, and I think that the black sunburst dial is an improvement over that black to blue graduated dial of the 43mm. So I just want to clarify something you might not be aware of. Bersigar and Pagani Design are made by the same factory in China. They're the same watch, they're just branded differently. The only differences are the branding on the crown. This has the Bersigar brand logo rather than the Pagani Design one, and the dial says Bersigar rather than Pagani Design. The only other difference is the signing. The engraving on the clasp says Bersigar, and also the screw down exhibition case back says Bersigar. But both watches are absolutely identical with regards to their specifications, their price points, and also the look of the watches respectively. There's no difference in the quality of a Pagani Design. For example, the Bersigar reference for this Explorer is BG-1651. The Pagani Design version reference number is PD-1651, so they even use the same reference numbers for the two respective pieces. So 40mm case, it's 13mm thick as one would expect, 48mm lug to lug measurement, and a lug width of 20mm. So very close to the dimensions of the Rolex Yachtmaster, as one would expect, being a 40mm homage to the watch. With regards to the rest of the specification, it uses a sapphire crystal on the front. In the screw down exhibition case back, it's glazed with a mineral crystal as a cost cutting measure. It has 100 meters of water resistance, so there are two hermetic seals. There is a 100-meter hermetic seal between the screw-down crown and the crown tube, and a second 100-meter hermetic seal between the stainless steel screw-down exhibition case back, which is glazed with mineral crystal, as I've discussed. Now, with regards to the execution of the coin edge finish screw down crown, it's solid stainless steel, nicely signed with the Bersigar brand logo, and it's silky smooth to operate. The threading on the internal thread on the crown and also the external thread of the crown tube, they do mesh very well. There's a nice pickup, silky smooth thread action, and when one unscrews the crown it pops out. It's got a spring-loaded action because it uses the Seiko NH35A, and that's a characteristic of it. It pops the crown out so you can hack the movement and manually wind it to top up the 40-hour power reserve. So with regards to the watch, it's covered by a 12-month warranty, which is very reassuring, and I'll talk you through the NH35A Seiko movement. The NH35A is produced by Seiko in two countries, Japan and Malaysia respectively, and I'm pleased to report that this is the Japanese version of the NH35A rather than the Malaysian version. There's no difference between the quality of the Malaysian and Japanese versions, but I personally tend to favour the Japanese one over the Malaysian, just because Seiko is a Japanese company and I actually prefer movements to be made in Japan rather than Malaysia. So the NH35A is a 24 dual movement. It runs at a frequency of 21,600 vibrations per hour, and it has 40 hours of power reserve, and it has hand winding and hacking, as I've discussed. The stated accuracy of the NH35A is minus 20 seconds to plus 40 seconds per day, so it's not the most accurate of movements, but however it is a very reliable, well-proven workhorse movement, so it's durable but not very accurate. I'm pleased to report that this one is running at plus 15 seconds per day, so it is indeed within those limits of minus 20 to plus 40 seconds per day. I think plus 15 seconds per day is perfectly acceptable accuracy for a watch which is low tier. This is only £120. So good movement. Now, with regards to the watch, yes, it's a good looking watch. It's clearly an homage to the Rolex Yachtmaster. And at £120, one could say, well, it's a good value watch. Now, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value. So yes, the watch is good value. It has a Japanese-made Seiko NH35A movement and a ceramic bezel insert with a sapphire crystal. So the specification is so far looking strong. But however, I don't consider it to be excellent quality, and that may come as a surprise to you because it does look good. So I'll talk you through the negatives of the watch and then you'll understand why I say that. The first problem with the watch is the execution of the bezel, and I'm not talking about the 3D ceramic bezel insert, which is actually finished very well. The quality of the ceramic bezel insert is very aesthetically pleasing. It's a well-made bezel insert. I'm talking about the stainless steel bezel itself with regards to the Bezel Action. So it's a 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. No problem whatsoever with the ratcheting mechanism. Sounds good, feels good, nice firm resistance, but however, it doesn't align correctly. The bezel insert doesn't align correctly with the 12 o'clock index, the triangle at 12 o'clock on the dial. As you can see, it's got backlash, and it's not minor backlash, it's major. Now, this is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and as you can see, there's a full 2 to 3 clicks of backlash. It's wholly unacceptable to have that amount of clockwise backlash on any bezel at any price point. It's really a shame because it's a good looking bezel with that ceramic bezel insert, but it just doesn't work well, and really that is the biggest disappointment of this watch. So the clockwise bezel backlash isn't the only problem. It also has lateral play, side to side play. So if I grip the case tightly, I'm going to now try and show you. There's actually play side to side between the bezel and the case. If you look closely, you can see it. And it's also top to bottom play as well. It's not just side to side play. It's all the way around the bezel. There's a wobble between the stainless steel bezel and the case. It's just not a tight fit. So that compounds the problem of the bezel misalignment, because not only does it have clockwise backlash, as you can see, but it also has side-to-side lateral play. So the lateral play and the clockwise backlash, they work against each other. It compounds the problem and it exaggerates the fact that it doesn't align. So it's a very badly executed bezel, and it's something that I really think that Bersigar and also Pagani design, they're made by the same factory, they really need to address that quality control, that build quality issue. Now, there are other problems with the watch. the Cyclops magnifier is adhered to the sapphire crystal crooked. If you look at the Cyclops magnifier, it doesn't sit correctly over the date window, the date complication at 3. So the date complication is showing the 28th day of the month, but it's actually, the Cyclops is actually rotated anti-clockwise, and it's actually not aligned. It doesn't sit correctly over the date window. It's crooked. Now again, this is a primary quality control defect. It's unacceptable at any price point. There are less expensive watches getting it right. They get the bezel alignment correct. They get the backlash minimal in the Bezel Action. They also align the Cyclops magnifier correctly over the date complication at 3 o'clock. So really it's unacceptable for Bersigar to be making these kind of production defects, and it's unacceptable for their quality control not to be picking up the defects and rejecting the watch as being sub-quality. So crooked Cyclops magnifier and poor Bezel Action. Unfortunately, they're not the only negatives to this watch. It has an oyster style bracelet with mirror polished centre links. The quality of the polishing in terms of the finishing of the mirror polishing is done to a poor standard. One can still see the grains of the stainless steel from machining those links, and one can also see that the mirror polishing is done to a very poor standard. And the mirror polishing is only on the top side, it's not on the underside of the links. So the problem with that is when you bend the bracelet, if you open the links up, they're unfinished on the interior of each of those centre links. And that's a real disappointment. As you can see, they're not mirror polished on the edges of the centre links. It's a cost-cutting measure. They simply polish the exterior of those centre links to a mirror polish. The rest of them are unfinished. As you can see looking at that one, it's unpolished. The next one is also unpolished, and the next one again is unpolished. It's brushed satin finish on the inside. So it's a cost-cutting measure and very poorly executed. Now the other problem with it is the pins going through the centre links. Just look at the fit. Look at the wobble between the pin going through the end link. You can see the extra play there. And that's the case with all of the bracelet links. The pins going through the centre links have wobble. Cumulatively, when you add up the wobble of each link in the bracelet, you can see there's a massive amount of rattle in the bracelet. It's very rattly and it feels light and poor quality. Again, that's not the only problem. Look at the glide lock clasp. This is clearly meant to be a copy of the Rolex glide lock. It doesn't have a glide lock mechanism, but it's meant to replicate the look of it. It has a flip lock, which is very similar to the glide lock. Look at the step between the flip lock clasp and the body, the flank of the glide lock. There's a huge 1mm step on the edge. And on the underside, there's also a mismatch. There's an edge between the flip lock and the body of the glide lock. It's not flush. The flanks of the glide lock should be flush between the flip lock and the body. It's really bad on the top side. As you can see, there's a 1mm step. Now the problem with it is it's actually very sharp. The four corners of the body of the clasp are actually sharp points, and they would actually tear your skin on the wrist if you made contact with them. They haven't been deburred correctly in the factory. The other problem is the edges of the glide lock are sharp edges. They don't have a chamfer, they don't have a bevel, they haven't been deburred. It's like a razor blade. So the edges of the clasp would take your skin off, as with the sharp points of the body of it. So it doesn't just look bad because of that step and misalignment, it also is poorly executed. It's very sharp on the corners and very sharp on the edges. It's unacceptable at any price point to have a poorly finished clasp like this. Now, the interior is clearly meant to replicate the early Rolex glide lock clasps used in the Submariner. It has a satin finish, as one can see, and the current versions of the Rolex Submariner glide lock clasp are polished to a mirror finish, but early versions did have this satin finish. I don't find it to be aesthetically pleasing. Now, with regards to the way the mechanism of the flip lock actually fits to the interior, look at the amount of wobble there. Now the problem with that amount of wobble is it puts extra stress, it puts extra shear load on the pin going through the hinge. And my question is, how long is that going to last before it shears the pin and fails? The same is the case on the EasyLink extension. They haven't put a glide lock mechanism, it's just got a copy of the 5mm EasyLink extension. This is a brand new 2020 watch. It's unworn, and already you can see the scuffs and scratches on the mirror polishing to the centre links. That is exactly why I'm not a fan of mirror polishing on bracelet links. They quickly become scuffed and scratched, and as you can see they look terrible. Now this is on a brand new watch. But just look at the amount of play between the Easy Link extension and the body of that glide lock clasp. Again, how long is that pin going to last before it shears because of the extra stress, the extra shear load put on it because it's a sloppy fit. So it does click in and out, it does work okay, and it's not going to pull out. But even when it's fitted, there's a lot of lateral play. As you can see, it wobbles about and it just adds to more rattle. So bracelet very lightweight, very rattly. The screw down exhibition case back is finished to an acceptable standard. It has a brushed satin finish to the stainless steel portion. It's glazed with mineral crystal, as I've discussed, and it's nice to see the movements. The NH35A is undecorated. It's got a plain stainless steel rotor. The bridges of the movements are just basic, but I do like it. It's nice to be able to see a movement, to see the balance wheel running, and I always like to see an exhibition case back rather than the less expensive option, which is a solid stainless steel case back. The underside of the case is brushed satin finish, which complements the screw down stainless steel case back, the exhibition case back. The quality of the finishing on the solid end links is very poor. They're roughly machined and they still have the machine marks. They're not polished or deburred correctly, and again I'm confident that they would have sharp edges on them because they don't have any deburring. So roughly finished end links and a real disappointment. Now with regards to the watch, I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet. I simply took the watch out of the watch box and put it on my wrist, and I'm pleased to report that the 40mm case does fit my 8-inch wrist very well with the 48mm lug to lug measurement and the 13mm thickness. I'm confident that this watch would easily fit underneath the shirt cuff because the 13mm total height, the thickness of the watch, is standard. It's the same thickness as a Rolex Submariner with the super case, for example. So as you can see, it does fit my wrist very well, and the bracelet is long enough to fit an 8-inch wrist. As you can see, there's some room underneath it. So comfortable piece to wear due to the flat exhibition case back, which is glazed with mineral crystal. So it does look nice on the wrist. It's a comfortable piece to wear and it doesn't feel very heavy. It doesn't have tremendous heft, which is a criticism of the 43mm version. That was a very large piece which wore with excessive heft. So the 43mm version of this Bersigar Explorer was an uncomfortable piece to wear. It was a top heavy piece. This one feels much lighter and it feels more comfortable. I like the 40mm case. I think it's better done. It's just a shame the poor execution of the mirror polish centre links in the Oyster bracelet and the defects in the bracelet and the clasp, as I've discussed. So lastly, I'll give you a lume test and then I will finally surmise the watch. So I'm just going to turn out my lights and then I will fully charge up the watch using my 100 LED torch. So this LED torch has 100 UV LEDs and it's going to charge up the lume on this watch to the absolute maximum peak performance. I always like to do this with watches to see just what is the maximum performance of the lume. Now this is £120, it's a low tier piece, so I'm not expecting the lume to be outstanding. I'm not expecting Swiss BGW9 Super Luminova or Rolex Chrome Light level in terms of the brightness, but we'll see how brightly it glows when it's fully charged. So as you can see, it's now fully charged. Now the first thing that's notable is the 9 o'clock and the 6 o'clock indices on the dial are a different tone to the rest of the dial. The Mercedes hands are glowing blue, as you can see, but strangely they've opted for a green tone to the lume on the 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock indices. And I have to be honest with you and say that I dislike the mismatch. I don't understand the reasoning behind that. It just doesn't look right to have blue Mercedes hands, blue indices on the dial, but for some reason they've made the 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock green. Now the lume is already beginning to fade and fade fast. It didn't glow very brightly initially and now it's beginning to fade to nothing. So I would describe the lume on the hands and also the dial as being very poor quality. Very disappointing, even though this is only £120. It's nothing like the quality of lume one gets with the Seiko 5. I really think Seiko Luma Bright is much better quality, for example. And bear in mind, the Seiko 5 is not significantly more expensive than this watch at £120. So the lume is another negative of the watch, and also I dislike the green and blue mismatch. So lastly, I'll surmise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. The watch should be both excellent quality and excellent value. So initially the watch does look like it's excellent value because it's £120, and on paper the specification looks impressive. Sapphire crystal, Seiko NH35A movement, which is made in Japan, and it's also got a 3D ceramic bezel insert. So these are all looking like high specification aspects of the piece. 40mm piece and 100 meters of water resistance. So it looks like a good value piece at £120, and that is why the majority of collectors will buy a Bersigar or a Pagani Design Explorer. But as I've discussed, when you look at the watch in detail, there are several quality control and build quality defects which are highly disappointing. The Bezel Action is the worst one. The Cyclops is misaligned, as I've discussed, and also the bracelet is poorly executed. The clasp has sharp edges, and as you can see, it's poorly aligned and finished. So the negatives really do outweigh the positives, and therefore, although it appears initially to be excellent value at £120, no, it is not excellent quality. It's very poor quality. So unfortunately, it's a good looking watch, but it fails to deliver, and I cannot recommend it for that reason. I really think that this is a poor buy, and I would advise you not to buy either the Pagani Design Explorer, and I would say do not buy the Bersigar version that you're looking at here either. Good looking watch, but very poor build quality and very poor quality control. So disappointing watch. I hope you like my review of the Bersigar Explorer. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.